Hi guys, I'm watching this press conference between Donald Trump and obviously the media, and this reporter is asking a question about Puerto Rico and the response. And Donald Trump is going to say a couple of things which I found very nefarious. It could be that I'm just reading into it too much, but let's see if you agree.
Well, I think Puerto Rico was incredibly successful.
First thing, incredibly successful. Over 3,000 people died there. It's not that I'm pointing out the insensitivity of it, but I think that Puerto Rico was a test of a hurricane hitting and a blackout happening. It was incredibly successful.
Puerto Rico was actually our toughest one of all because it's an island, so you did.
Our toughest one of all because it's an island. Now, geoengineering, if you're steering a hurricane, it would be tough to hit an island.
You can't truck things onto it, everything's by boat. We moved a hospital into Puerto Rico, a tremendous military hospital in the form of a ship, you know that. And I actually think, and the governor's been very nice, and if you ask the governor, he'll tell you what a great job. I think probably the hardest one we had by far was Puerto Rico because of the island nature. And I actually think it was one of the best jobs that's ever been done with respect to.
Are you hearing this?
Successful. Puerto Rico was actually our toughest one of all because it's an island, so you can't truck things onto it, everything's by boat. We moved a hospital into Puerto Rico, a tremendous military hospital in the form of a ship, you know that. And I actually think, and the governor's been very nice, and if you ask the governor, he'll tell you what a great job. I think probably the hardest one we had by far was Puerto Rico because of the island nature. And I actually think it was one of the best jobs that's ever been done with respect to what this is all about.
With respect to what this is all about, it's the best job that's ever been done with respect to what this is all about. That is incredibly nefarious and cryptic language that's being used there. It's all about the success of the hurricane hitting the island and how tough it was to do because it's an island.
Puerto Rico got hit not with one hurricane, but with two. And the problem with Puerto Rico is their electric grid and their electric generating plant was dead before the storms ever hit. It was in very bad shape. It was in bankruptcy. Had no money. It was largely closed. And when the storm hit, they had no electricity essentially before the storm. And when the storm hit, that took it out entirely. The job that FEMA and law enforcement and everybody did working along with the governor in Puerto Rico, I think was tremendous. I think that Puerto Rico was an incredible.
Just remember what you said about the electricity, yeah?
Unsung success. Texas, we have the best jobs that's ever been done with respect to what this is all about. Puerto Rico got hit not with one hurricane, but with two. And the problem with Puerto Rico is their electric grid and their electric generating plant was dead before the storms ever hit. It was in very bad shape. It was in bankruptcy. Had no money. It was largely closed. And when the storm hit, they had no electricity essentially before the storm. And when the storm hit, that took it out entirely.
When the storm hit, that took it out entirely. That's an ominous reference to what Hurricane Florence is going to do. Or is something's going to happen under that kind of same theory, whether that's the hurricane itself, or whether it's an EMP or a cyber attack during the hurricane. Cyber attack is probably my least likely. The other two are more likely.
The job that FEMA and law enforcement and everybody did working along with the governor in Puerto Rico, I think was tremendous. I think that Puerto Rico was an incredible unsung success. Texas, we have been given A-pluses for. Florida, we've been given A-pluses for. I think in a certain way, the best job we did was Puerto Rico, but nobody would understand that. I mean, it's harder to understand. It was a very hard thing to do. Because of the fact they had no election.
No one would understand that. Why? Yeah, because he's not talking about the success of the response or the recovery, because there was no success in the response or the recovery. The only success was the hurricane hitting the island.
But before the storms hit, it was dead, as you probably know. So we've gotten a lot of receptivity, a lot of thanks for the job we've done in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is very important. And by the way, speaking of Puerto Rico, and they're going to be affected pretty soon by something else that's on its way. Is that right?
Potentially, Hurricane Isaac right now is tracking south of the island, but we have several thousand people inside Puerto Rico right now working on long-term recovery that have shifted to the response mode to monitor as Isaac passes to the south.
We do not want to see Hurricane Isaac hit Puerto Rico. That's all we need. But we have a big hurricane out there, and it's sort of skirting along Puerto Rico and the edge of Puerto Rico. That would not be good.
Mr. President, how much money do you think you'll need for recovery efforts in this next hurricane, and do you have that?
Well, we have it currently. We're going to, obviously, these are all unanticipated, so we'll go to Congress. Congress will be very generous because we have no choice. This is the United States, and it's whether it's Texas or Florida, or frankly, if it's Virginia, because Virginia looks like it's very much in the path. Maryland, by the way, could be affected.
Virginia, Maryland, Virgin Mary, Hurricane Florence, blooming.
Very seriously affected, just to add. It's a little bit outside of the path. And then, of course, South Carolina, North Carolina. I think that...
Oh my, it's all starting to connect a bit in my head. We're going to have to take a quick trip to the IPEC goat video, because in reference to Virginia, Maryland being the Virgin Mary and Hurricane Florence being the blooming, that's what this represents. But the apple from where this blooms is dropped out of this girl's hand, and this girl is wearing all white, representing virginity. When the apple drops and it blooms, that is showing the age of maturity, reaching puberty. That age is usually 12. When the apple opens, we see the one seed and the two seeds from Obama's perspective, which is 12, the 12th. Obama is connected to Hawaii, where we have the volcano, which is showing signs of activity. I didn't think the video would keep up with me. I'm gonna reload it. This is live. What I'm doing right now. Yeah, you're basically seeing what I would normally do before I record the video. So we're seeing signs of activity at fissure number 8, from where the potential eruption is going to come from. See, things, that's what happens. Things just start clicking all of a sudden. We're definitely in some crazy times. And if this marking on the floor represents 3 numbers, as in the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th, it may be that, yeah, because the 15th is more pronounced, that's when the missile comes up out of the ocean, the SLBM. And I believe that's because submarines. Oh gosh, this is all fitting together like crazy. 1 second, guys. Where is it? I think you guys know the part I'm looking for, where the blue man is dancing around, spinning in a circle, suggesting a hurricane or some sort of form of cyclogenic pattern, wearing what could be a fish or frog mask, suggesting something to do with water. East Coast, underwater, hurricane, shark fins, submarines. Russia, the bear. More reference to hurricanes and a missile. Okay. This is I've lost my words. I'm gonna let Donald Trump speak some more because he's got more to say, and there's more for me to tell you guys.
Any amounts of money, whatever it takes, we're going to do. But we're already set up. We have tremendous trucking systems. We have food systems. We have a lot of contractors waiting. But for the most part, it's been handled by FEMA, and also we've coordinated locally. We have food for days. We have emergency equipment and generators for many days. We should be in great shape. Now, I've also heard it could be 21 and 22 inches. If you can imagine what that is, 22 inches of rain.
Okay, 22 inches of rain. This thought I had before. I made the video and then I realized I didn't hit the record button, so I had to do it again. But pointing out the connection with the girl and the apple and the movement, everything there, that was just then. But this is what I discovered at this point when he's talking about 22 inches of rain, the B being the 22nd letter of the alphabet, the rain being represented by the water droplet running down his nose. But his nose is a volcano, you guys. I never noticed it before, but I am noticing it now. The flank of the volcano, look at it. It's crazy. This part from here, you guys, from this part, imagine that is the Helene slump. Now, this part would represent the volcano, but it's separated from here because they've drawn it as a kind of lighter color and they've made it darker down here, suggesting it's separate from this. But you'll notice that this marking on his nose is actually the tip of the volcano, and this marking coming down is the lava running down. If you disagree with that, then just think about it in line with this marking just above his eye, but below his eyebrow, which is lava or magma, whatever, eruption, explosive material firing out of the volcano that way and firing out of the volcano that way. The dark eyes is actually smoke drifting from, or ash rather, drifting from the tip of the volcano. If his eye was shut, it would all be that kind of dark purpley kind of color, which in this image would represent ash from the volcano. The B also represents volcano, but number 22, 22 inches of rain connected with a volcano. That is Kilauea. And we know that from all the other references that we've got in this video that we've already gone over. But the fact that we've got the volcano as Obama's nose, even the way they've angled it and made the colouring a bit lighter down here, suggesting a separation of the volcano, most likely from the Helene slump. Fish number 8 involved, because we see that inside the apple. And all of it's connected to the 12th in terms of Hawaii, which is tomorrow. At the moment, it's the 11th of September, or 9/11, at 9:42. Whoa. I'm going to play some more.
It is not something that we've had. Certainly, we've never had this on the East Coast. So, but I think we're very well prepared, very well set up, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think this storm right here is very similar to Hurricane Hugo, and it's almost like a combination of Hurricane Hugo in '89 and Hurricane Floyd in 1999. But look, successful disaster response and recovery is one that's locally executed, state managed, and federally supported. So what FEMA is doing is pre-positioning the federal government's assets to support each one of those governors that are about to be impacted with achieving their response and recovery goals. And that's the way emergency management and disaster response works best. I also think I'd like to point out that what we learned last year is that we have got to build a true culture of preparedness within our citizens here in America. This is a partnership, and it takes anything from neighbor helping neighbor all the way to the federal government when it comes to correctly responding and recovering. Minister, can we ask you?
Do you notice how FEMA is more prepared for this hurricane than they have been for any of the previous 6 or 7 hurricanes? You have to ask yourself, why is that? An A+ rating for Florida, when he's talking about the hurricane hitting Florida, Hurricane Irma. An A+ for the hurricane that hit Texas, I believe that was Hurricane Harvey. And in regards to the hurricane hitting Puerto Rico, it was an incredible success because of how tough it was, because it was an island. If you take that one way, you're talking about the response effort. If you take that another way, that's geoengineering and directing a hurricane and kind of patting yourself on the back for the success of hitting a small island with a hurricane. And having had the test of that and the blackout and the electric grid going down, which they still haven't fully recovered from, you've now got a model for the East Coast. And he's talking about, no one's really mentioned Virginia and Maryland. They've been talking about North Carolina, South Carolina, but Donald Trump mentions Virginia and Maryland, where those explosions along the Potomac River took place earlier in the year. See, I knew there was a reason I was reading all these reports, because it all fits together. There's reasons. All those explosions that took place along the Potomac River between Virginia and Maryland, the Virgin Mary, and then you've got Hurricane Florence representing to flower or to blossom, talking about a girl reaching puberty or reaching maturity. The same thing is referenced in the iPad Goat video with the young girl dropping the apple, which is a symbolization of her innocence, I guess. And then out of that, the blooming lotus, which is also a representation of an eruption from fissure number 8, may be connected to 22 inches of rain, which Donald Trump has just mentioned. He's certainly aware of what's going on.
What's FEMA right now? Sure, great. That's a great question. So FEMA doesn't own the power grids in any one of these states. A lot of them are owned by the private industry. So what we have are business emergency operations center calls. We're concentrating with the private vendors to make sure that they have strong mutual aid programs in place, and we set up incident support bases to help stage power crews coming in from other states. And largely, it's FEMA's job to get out of the way to make sure that the private power companies can get into these areas to set up their grid. We don't own it. We don't own it.
But unlike Puerto Rico, you have very...
It's important to pay attention to the fact that he had to say we don't own it twice to put extra emphasis on the fact that FEMA doesn't own a lot of the electric grids along the East Coast. So in the event that the electric grids in those states were to go down, it's not FEMA's responsibility to fix it because they don't own it. But I bet you they do own an electric grid, one contained within some form of FEMA camp or multiple FEMA camps. And to get electricity, to get power, to get water, to get food, as you heard, they've got days of food. More likely they've got more than that. They've obviously got days of water, and all of those things in this event, people are going to be, if the way that I'm thinking these things is going to go down, people are going to be needing those kind of things if they haven't prepared ahead of this. And FEMA's going to be right there to offer it, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be a cost attached to it. Stay away from the FEMA camps if you can, guys. If you've got access to other forms of help, if you need it, take those other forms, even if it's more difficult, because we know that FEMA is all about containing the population. And in this event, with all the chaos going on potentially on the West Coast from tomorrow, and everything that will be going on the East Coast following on from that, people will be going to FEMA for support. Who knows if they'll get it? I don't know. Yeah.
Very strong power companies. They're very powerful, very well managed in the sense that they have tremendous overcapacity. They are going to do a great job. They also have made contracts with other power companies that won't be affected, and they're going to be coming in. Just to answer your question, they'll be coming in to the various states that will be affected. They're going to be coming in very strongly, and they're already lining up. They'll be here probably for the most part tomorrow or shortly before the storm hits. So they're going to be in great shape. These are really states that have very, very strong power authorities.
What's your message, Mr. President, to people who might not have evacuated yet?
Well, that's very risky. I mean, again, we've never seen anything quite like this on the East Coast, at least. And if it turns out to be as bad, you know, we go out there. You have You have people that actually go fly through these storms. These are very brave people, but they fly through. And from what I'm hearing, the sites that they're seeing have not been seen on the East Coast before. So I would say everybody should get out. I mean, you have to listen to your local authority.
The sites that they've been seeing is something they've never seen before. There's been plenty of Category 5 hurricanes, so what is so different about this one? And notice when he's telling everyone to get out, he is not just referencing the Carolinas, North Carolina, South Carolina. He's talking about the entire East Coast.
And whether you're upland or downland, but depending on where you are, you have to listen and you have to get out. If they want you to get out, because it's going to be impossible to have people get in there, whether it's law enforcement or FEMA or anybody else, once this thing hits, it's going to be really, really bad along the coast. Okay? Anything else?
Do you believe Rob Porter and Gary Cohn's denial today?
Okay, then it goes into off-topic stuff. But it's pretty clear that these hurricanes are unusual. And by unusual, I mean geoengineered, and they're being steered in these directions. And the rehearsals for those took place last year, I believe, with Hurricane Irma, Maria, Jose, and Harvey. Now we've got 6 hurricanes, 3 in the Pacific, 3 in the Atlantic. From the 15th, Hurricane Mangkhut is going to become a very strong Category 5 hurricane sitting between the Philippines and Taiwan. Most of its wind shear is going to be over Taiwan. Be aware, because again, trajectories could change. This eyewall could be over the country entirely. I mean, it would be completely under. You wouldn't be able to see it from an aerial shot. Obviously, Taiwan is a rogue, well, is said to be rogue from China. And they see it as part of China, but Taiwan claims independence. And with all these events going on, potentially leading up into a war, strange things are happening. On this day, on the 15th, is when I expect the Chinese tanks or the military to be moving into North Korea towards the DMZ at the same time as this hurricane is going on. And then the next hurricane is Olivia, which on the 12th is going to be passing through Hawaii, which is tomorrow. And, you know, obviously, as a hurricane, it's going to bring plenty of rain with it. I don't know if it's going to be 22 inches worth. I don't think so. Zoom in. No, nowhere near 22 inches worth of rain, but that could just be a reference. Again, the reference to 22 inches of rain is for Florence, but from the iPad Goat video, there's a dual connection to Hawaii. And Hurricane Paul is of no consequence. It's going to fizzle out by the 15th. It will no longer be there, so that's not going to affect anyone. Probably important to their hurricane story that they're telling with the names, in terms of bringing out the Antichrist. Well, the Antichrist being kind of soon. It's very soon. All this is part of their final rituals to bring forth that creature. Sorry, there was bad words on my tongue at that time. Sorry, Heavenly Father. But putting that aside, over in the Atlantic, we've obviously got the watch on Hurricane Florence. Everyone's watching that now. It has the potential to bloom into a Category 5, which I think it will. It's slow moving, and the waters across the Atlantic and the Pacific are very warm, 28 to 30 degrees. So there's plenty of fuel for the hurricane to bloom into a Category 5 by the time it reaches the East Coast. Whether that's... It looks like they're sticking with the hurricane approaching the Carolinas, and that would be by the 13th. I'm still going to pay close attention, because if you'll notice in the news reports, they are still unsure as to whether this is the set trajectory, which I find unusual, because they've been able to set trajectories quite solidly for hurricanes that have been a week out. This one is 2 days out, and they're still wondering if it's going to be here or there. Is it going to shift a little bit here? Is it going to shift a little bit there? So, considering that this hurricane has the potential to be geoengineered, it could be that it just takes a wild shift very late in the day on the 13th. We'll keep an eye on it, but as I said, the entire East Coast should be on alert. As Donald Trump said, he didn't just reference the Carolinas when he was talking about the coast evacuating. And that's obviously, in terms of the scenario and the timeline, that would be after what happens on the West Coast from what would be a tsunami coming from the eruption at Kilauea. So, just a thought, it's possible that the eruption doesn't cause a tsunami from Kilauea, but they're definitely referencing the 4 elements in the use of the wind, the earth, the fire, and the water, volcanoes, hurricanes, tsunamis, and earthquakes. And then the 5th element, metal, is war. So that's already brewing in the Middle East, and we know that World War III is going to start in the Middle East and it's going to spill over into the rest of the world. We've already got pretty much all the world powers building up over there. Turkey, Iran, Russia, China, even China's got involved. Germany saying it's going to get involved now. France is already involved. The UK is involved. So, Iraq's in there as well. So you've got all these major world players all converging in Syria in terms of war. And the news about the reports about a chemical attack being planned just tells you that a chemical attack is going to happen, and a large number of people are going to die, possibly 10,000 as I theorized, and that is going to lead to a massive response, as Donald Trump has said. Any use of chemical weapons again will lead to a much bigger response, and obviously Russia has brought in submarines, it's brought in extra military. They're all ready for this World War III to start in the Middle East and then spill over to the rest of the world. The other hurricane in the Atlantic is Isaac, which is what Donald Trump was talking about, passing to the south of Puerto Rico, but he's saying, I hope Puerto Rico doesn't get hit again, which is the second time he said that in reference to a hurricane in Puerto Rico. This will be a Category 1 tropical storm, but Donald Trump was referencing it as a big storm, so it may be that it intensifies quite rapid intensification, as they keep talking about, over the next 24 to 48 hours and becomes, Category 2 or 3. Either way, the Caribbean should be on alert, Puerto Rico should be on alert, through to Jamaica. By the time we get to the 15th, it has become more of a tropical depression, and not too much to worry about by that time, but before that, you need to be cautious, especially around the kind of 13th, 14th, which is about the same kind of time frame as Florence will be impacting the East Coast. And then you've got Helene, which will be moving up north, going towards the UK, reaching there by the 18th of September. And we appear to be suffering from the wind factor of the 4 elements that they're using. Well, obviously got the hurricanes on the East Coast, but this is a very large, strong wind system. And then you've got Hurricane Helene coming in as well as a Category 1 to the southwest of the United Kingdom. So there's a lot to watch for, and a lot of hurricanes being used, geoengineered in my opinion, to fit a scenario that looks natural but is entirely not. And that goes with the kind of deceiving the people into thinking that all these things happened naturally. Maybe it was an act of God, they'll say. But no. So Philippines, Taiwan, look out for Hurricane Mancook. Hawaii, you've been getting warnings for months from various different people for various different reasons. If you haven't chosen to leave the island by now, then you're really probably not going to. So, you know, our prayers and our hopes that nothing happens on the 12th when Hurricane Olivia passes through. Hurricane Florence, we're on alert for New York and the possibility of submarines moving underneath this slow-moving hurricane, which is ideal for submarine travel. Possibility of blackouts, whether that's localized or across the entire eastern coast of the United States, modeled after Puerto Rico, or Puerto Rico over here, the west coast, on a possible watch for tsunami from an eruption of Kilauea. That would be on the 12th as well. Depending on the time of day, could be the 13th for you guys. And then we've got the UK, so watch out for strong winds and Hurricane Helene around the 18th of September, probably moving more forward as well. So I think just watching some of the things Donald Trump said and some of the connections that could be made to this IPEC video, 22 inches of rain dropping onto the volcano that's on Obama's nose, or is Obama's nose, the eruption that's happening from that, the ash that's coming out, and if that follows, then that links into a tsunami, which I am thinking it's the 12th for Hawaii and the 13th for the West Coast, mainly because I think it's 11 p.m. on the 12th in Hawaii and 2 a.m. on the 13th on the West Coast. So, I mean, don't restrict yourselves to that time, but that's what I'm seeing in terms of interpretation. So we'll see if anything like that happens. That's all I've got to say, I think. Yeah, you guys have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and may the Heavenly Father bless you.